Tonight, cautious optimism over the current wave of COVID. Football fans will be back in the stadium from next week, but more checks on vaccine passports.
But while fans rejoice, fury over partying at Downing Street during the height of the lockdown. Calls for the Prime Minister to resign over the bring your own booze garden gathering.
I didn't break the rules when my brother and my father died. They broke the rules to have a bottle of wine. How is that fair?
A warning to dog owners that you could now end up with a jail sentence if your pet attacks farmers' livestock.
And the youngster giving a knockout performance in the boxing ring, despite not being able to see. I'm John Mackay in Glasgow.
And I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. Crowds will be allowed back at big outdoor events in Scotland from next week. It means fans will be able to attend football matches and the Six Nations rugby, but they'll need to have had a booster vaccine or a negative COVID test to do so.
The easing of the rules comes as the First Minister told Parliament there are some reasons for cautious optimism about the progress of the current outbreak of the virus. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
When Celtic play Hibernian here on Monday, there's now no bar on it being a full house.
I think it's the right decision to let people back in. I think especially for when it comes to football and people's mental health and being able to get out and see their friends.
I've got my booster and stuff, so yeah, I think we'd be okay to let us back in again.
You look forward to these things. These are part of your life, you know, and when it's not there, it does mean something special.
The First Minister said there will be safeguards. Vaccine passports of at least 50% of fans will have to be checked.
In some other countries, of course, it's 100% checks of vaccine certificates that are required. So I've got every confidence in the football authorities and in the rugby authorities to continue to operate responsibly and effectively.
Today's statement was watched keenly in the hospitality industry, but at this hotel in Edinburgh, they didn't hear what they wanted. Measures like enforced table service and distancing between groups will remain in force until at least the 24th of January.
December was actually shaping up really quite well until we got the message of almost cancel your event by guilt, don't have a Christmas celebration. So we can now directly track across December and January over £225,000 of business that just simply hasn't materialised.
People can no longer live their lives waiting to hear on an ad hoc basis on what the rules will be day by day. Businesses and workers cannot plan for the future properly if they cannot predict the government's response.
Of course we want to give as much clarity and predictability as possible, but we are dealing with an infectious, unpredictable, mutating virus. Any government that gets itself stuck in fixed triggers or fixed ways of thinking about things is not serving the health and the safety of the country well.
There was also an announcement of £5 million to provide extra ventilation in schools, something teachers have been campaigning for.
This is recognition of the fact that schools need to be safer, which is something that has been lacking, I would say, in the last 2 years. So we're really delighted that that recognition has come about. But now the test will be what it looks like in terms of implementation.
Yes, I thought we did.
All of this comes amid the context of easing the pressure on the NHS. This morning, the Health Secretary visited the team who run the Hospital at Home project in Edinburgh, which aims to avoid particularly older people having to be admitted.
It has to be a big part of the future, and it's not just hospital at home. I think you need to look more generally about what services, what treatments can we deliver closer to people's homes that give the same benefits and outcomes as if you went into an acute hospital.
The initiative here goes some way in helping reduce the pressure on acute hospital beds at a time there's been a surge in demand for them. In the data, though, there are now some signs that that rapid rise in admissions is beginning to slow. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Our political editor Colin Mackay is in the Scottish Parliament. So Colin, a more upbeat mood there than at the end of last year?
Well, it always seems a bit more positive when the government is removing restrictions than when they're imposing them. Now, as we predicted last night, the limits on crowds are being lifted. The Scottish Cabinet met this morning and they agreed to press ahead with that from Monday. So that's good news for football and rugby fans. But there is a slight sting in the tail to that, in that half of fans going to any of these big games will have to be checked in terms of their COVID passports or a negative lateral flow test. And from Monday, to have your COVID passport really up to date, to be fully vaccinated in Scotland, means you'll have 3 jags. So that's good news for the fans getting back into the grounds, but it's going to be a lot more work for the clubs and the organisers of these big events to check them all. The First Minister also signalled some other possible changes slightly further down the line, maybe from a weekend. So on the 24th of January, she's looking at lifting the limits on indoor audiences, so theatres and concerts getting back to normal. She's also going to consider things like table service in pubs and distancing in shopping centres. But the one thing she is going to consider, but probably not do, is reopening nightclubs. I just don't think that the numbers are coming down far enough for the government to give the go-ahead to that yet.
Colin at the Scottish Parliament, thank you. So more changes on the cards, and if you've got questions about the pandemic and the restrictions, then Scotland Tonight wants to hear from you. Scotland's National Clinical Director, Professor Jason Leach, will be on the programme on Thursday at 7:30 to answer your questions. You can email at scotlandtonight@stv.tv or get in touch via Twitter.
And staying on COVID, and the Prime Minister has had another bruising day following fresh revelations about a Bring Your Own Booze party at Downing Street in May 2020, at the very height of the first lockdown. Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, says Boris Johnson must answer if he was there and will have to go if he's found to have misled Parliament.
The party's former Scottish leader, Ruth Davidson, says the actions are indefensible. The Prime Minister stayed away from cameras today, leaving junior ministers to defend him with the line that investigations into claims of multiple parties are still ongoing. Our Westminster correspondent Catherine Sampson reports.
In May 2020, Lisa Wilkie's brother Graham died in intensive care in Edinburgh. They followed the rules, so most of his family couldn't be with him at the end.
Instead of being able to hold my mum, I was holding my phone and filming my brother dying.
A few days before, at Portobello Beach, police were pictured breaking up groups of sunbathers. This was May the 20th, the same day as Downing Street was preparing for a garden party. In an email leaked to ITV News, a top official invites dozens of staff, saying, "After what has been an incredibly busy period, we thought it would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather and have some socially distanced drinks. Please join us from 6 p.m. and bring your own booze."
This idea that, the people that were telling us about all these restrictions on our lives, we're off having, gin and tonic in the back garden. It is beyond belief. It is indefensible. You cannot defend it.
At the crack of dawn, the Prime Minister was filmed returning from a jog. Yesterday, he refused to deny that he and his wife were at the party. Today, he stayed in the shadows, away from questions in the Commons.
His absence speaks volumes, as does his smirks on the media. The public have already drawn their own conclusions. He can run, but he can't hide.
The Prime Minister should be here to answer these serious questions. Where is the government front bench? And indeed, where is the government backbenchers? This is a Prime Minister who has been accused of breaking a law that he himself set.
It's clear that in this country the same rules apply to everyone, and that is why that there is an investigation in progress. And if wrongdoing is established, there will be requisite disciplinary action taken.
Claims of multiple parties are being probed by a civil servant. Police have also said they're in touch with the Cabinet Office. Pressure on the Prime Minister is mounting. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives wasn't holding back.
He is so far refusing to answer what I think is a very basic question. He was either at the party or he wasn't at the party. And the government defence is, well, let's wait for Sue Gray's investigation, a really important investigation. But her inquiry would not be in any way undermined for the Prime Minister to come out and tell us right now, was he there or not? And that's what I expect him to do.
I didn't break the rules. When my brother and my father died, they broke the rules to have a bottle of wine. You know, how is that fair?
Sacrifices made by Lisa's family and so many others means this is a story that sticks. Well, at Westminster tonight, really, we're waiting for the Prime Minister to break his silence on this. Now, he wasn't in the House of Commons today, as you saw, but tomorrow he will face Prime Minister's questions, which is certain to be tense. Now, this leaked email has certainly renewed fury in his own party over this Downing Street party's story, with some of really the most brutal on-camera responses coming from Scottish Conservatives. Douglas Ross, who said it before, he said it again today. He thinks if the Prime Minister misled Parliament over this, then he should go. Now, there is no sense that I've had yet that the Prime Minister would plan to resign, but there has been some talk among Conservative MPs that perhaps over the next months, certainly if there are more revelations coming out, they might start to consider if they want to mount some form of challenge.
All right, Catherine from Westminster, thank you.
Councils are accusing the Scottish Government of passing the buck over funding for vital services. Speaking to MSPs, the umbrella organisation COSLA said there's little appetite for raising council tax above inflation following last month's budget settlement.
However, the Finance Secretary says she expects councils to make tax decisions that reflect the challenges facing households. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
Council tax has been either frozen or capped at a 3% rise since 2007. In last month's draft budget, the Scottish Government gave local authorities full control over setting rates. Councils claim their settlement threatens core services, leaving leaders angry they now have little option but to raise the tax.
The anger was even more that the Scottish Government have the ability to raise income tax themselves and chose not to. And what they've essentially done is pass the buck to local government to fill that funding gap because there wasn't sufficient funding within the block grant and within the settlement. So I think there's a real anger there amongst leaders.
However, COSLA says most councils are likely to raise tax in line with inflation, amounting to around 3%. The Finance Secretary told MSPs it's a decision for local authorities, who've been asking for more flexibility.
Like I have to take or make tax decisions that reflect the particular challenges facing households, that reflect our particular budget needs, I would expect local authorities to do likewise, taking into account some of the burdens on households right now, but also the need to fund local services.
Council workers are due to lodge their latest pay claim with COSLA by next week.
We are at a point where our members are on their knees and they require and deserve an inflationary increase to their pay this year. And as I said, I think the anger and frustration that they experience at the moment for their lack of recognition means that if that is not forthcoming in the next pay negotiations, which are going to start very soon, then we will be in an extremely difficult industrial landscape.
Councils face some difficult decisions in the run-up to local elections in May. Ewan Petrie, STV News.
Other stories across Scotland, and a business consultant who was arrested during the investigation into Craig White's takeover of Rangers has lost a multi-million-pound damages claim against the Crown Office and Police Scotland. David Greer was arrested in November 2014 but was later acquitted of all charges. A judge at the Court of Session ruled Mr Greer's lawyers had failed to prove the prosecution service had acted maliciously.
And MSPs have been told parents in Scotland are at the end of their tether over the mental health of their children. The pandemic has exacerbated problems in child and adolescent mental health services. Almost 2,000 patients waited more than a year to access support in September, compared to 959 the previous year. Now, police are reminding pet owners they could face fines of up to £40,000 or 12 months in prison if their dog is caught attacking livestock as the lambing season is underway. Legislation with the harsher penalties came into effect in November, and partner groups gathered in Balerno today to demonstrate the devastating impact an attack can have on the animals. Ivana Holland reports.
The last 2 years has seen a big rise in dog sales, but new owners should be aware of just who might be on their tail. Police and partner groups came together today to remind the public of the new severer penalties for dogs that worry, kill or injure farmed animals.
Previously it was up to £1,000, it's now up to £40,000 and or 12 months imprisonment, which maybe shows the gravity of the offences. Keep the dog in a lead. You apply that bit of common sense. Can you maybe not walk through that field? Can you take a different route round? So there's a balance to be struck.
This legislation came into effect in November, but today's launch serves as a reminder to the public that there are severe penalties should your animal be responsible for an attack on livestock. This updates legislation that has been in existence since 1953 and brings it into line with much more modern farming. Alpacas, ostriches and buffalo are now included in the new provisions. NFU Mutual claims the cost of dog attacks on livestock rose by 50% in the first quarter of last year compared with the same period in 2020.
If your horse has been bitten, it requires stitches and veterinary treatment, but also sometimes the horses are affected forever. And the worst thing that happens is when a rider falls off and the horse gets chased into traffic, and that can cause horrific accidents. We've had some terrible situations where people have been really badly hurt and horses have actually been killed as a result of dog attacks.
The campaign is running during the lambing season when the animals are most vulnerable and will run again in the autumn. Ivana Holland, STV News.
Well, let's get the weather now with Sean. And yes, it's fairly mild just now, but he's looking back at some extreme temperatures.
Now, it was a wee bit of a nippy start to today, but not as cold as it was 40 years ago when temperatures were extremely low, record-breakingly low in quite a few spots, and we hit the Scottish record of minus 27.2 40 years ago yesterday in Braemar. The other time was 1895, believe it or not, we hit minus 27.2, and we did it on a third occasion, 1995 in Altnahara. So lowest temperatures on record in Scotland, and for many central parts, 40 years ago this morning, this is what we were waking up to, around minus 19 Penicuik, minus 17 in Edinburgh and also parts of Renfrewshire. Some extremely low temperatures and for some spots record-breaking. That was, of course, 40 years ago. Just now, things very different over the next couple of days. Very, very mild. Let's have a look at the forecast.
A cold snap is on the way. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Well, all the proper cold and wintry weather, as you would expect, is across Russia, but extending way down into Eastern Europe, all the way towards Turkey and also Greece. Here, a very different story. We've got the high pressure centre to the south of us, so it is drawing that colder air across eastern parts, but then we're on the warmer side, the air returning from the Mediterranean, so our temperatures will be getting boosted over the next couple of days, back to very mild figures, 9, 10, even 11 degrees in some spots. Now tonight we're going to hang on to a fair amount of cloud today. We've seen some brightness, but thicker cloud coming in during tonight. The possibility of a few light drizzly outbreaks of rain, but really the weather for us here in the east is going to be very quiet over the next couple of days and also largely dry as well, but rather cloudy though. So tomorrow we hang on to largely cloudy skies, especially further west, possibility of some light drizzly outbreaks of rain, mainly across the hills. A little bit of brightness perhaps poking through eastern Fife, East Lothian, the borders, and where the little bit of sunshine does manage to poke through, temperatures St Andrews tomorrow could get up to about 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees in Fahrenheit, so it will be on the milder side. We still hold on to temperatures 8 to 10 degrees on Thursday. Again, we hang on to a lot of cloud, but a fair amount of dry weather. Drizzle outbreaks of rain in the west. Then on Friday, well, once again, the weather's very similar, quiet for us, but fairly cloudy, a little bit of sunshine at times. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
And finally from us, a teenager who lost both of his eyes to cancer when he was a child has stepped into his local boxing ring and delivered a knockout performance.
14-year-old Caden Ward says the sport has made a huge difference in his life. His coach says the young fighter is an inspiration. Our reporter Laura Piper joined him in the ring.
When lockdown hit, this was the salvation for Caden Ward. Bored at home, he stumbled across a local boxing club online. After a call between his mum and the coach, he was straight in the ring.
I was just straight in there because I did a wee bit boxing at home. Like pad work, it's like it takes me a while, but when I get into it and know where to hit, it's a lot easier. And sparring's a wee bit hard sometimes, but it's just the same thing. Once you get into a rhythm, you can, like, it just comes naturally, if you know what I mean. If I could do it, then anybody can do it.
Caden's coach says he's made a huge impact.
He's really transformed not just my outlook on things, but a lot of the other coaches and the boxers in the club as well. He doesn't see any adversity, he just sees it, wants it and goes for it. Caden's always here. Caden never misses a training session, and Caden has overcome greater adversity than anybody else in the gym.
Caden has been a fighter since he was a child. He lost both of his eyes before the age of 3 to retinoblastoma, a rare cancer that affects less than 50 children in the UK every year.
When he first came in, you were lucky to get 2 words out of him. I'm not saying we can't keep him quiet now, but you know, he chats away fine. He was part of the team.
Caden's also earned himself the reputation of having the strongest punch in the gym, something the other boxers can definitely confirm.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. It's been an inspiration to see how he's just went for it and done his best and always showing up, doing his best.
Caden has discovered more than just his right hook at the club. He's found friendship too. Laura Piper, STV News.
Nice work, Caden. An inspiring story.
I'll be back with Scotland Tonight, 10:40. Kellyanne will be watching, so you join her if you will. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.